All right, we are diving into Django today. So what is Django? It is essentially a very helpful backend framework because it does a lot of like really neat stuff out of the box, like providing you with ORM. And what is ORM? Can anyone tell me?
Object relational mapping.
Exactly. It is object relational mapping, which for us working with databases and models allows us to very quickly set up models and then migrate them so that we don't have to manually create all of these fields in the database. So, so far we've looked at how to set up a PostgreSQL database and how to use commands like create DB and um, creating tables and things of that nature. We are going to create a model and use that to populate our database inside of Django today. Also capable of doing RESTful API capabilities, similar to Flask, similar to a lot of things actually, but it wouldn't be as useful, nearly as useful if it wasn't able to do this. It is versatile and it's also portable. Virtual environments. We've talked about this a bit, and we didn't dive too deep into it because a lot of you are already very familiar with virtual environments. But just to summarize and reiterate, the key idea here is we are creating, let's say, a sterile environment that is entirely separate from the environments around it. So we were talking yesterday about using scicop2 versus scicop G3. Well, to avoid any kind of mix-ups between the two, you can have them separated into different environments. So another good reason for doing these environments, even when you're just, let's say, creating a demonstration or walking through a sample project, is it builds the muscle memory because repetition is how we learn, right? So the more we drill it in, the less effort it's going to take you to recall that in the future. Let's see. Well, I think everyone here should also be a little familiar with the principle of dry coding, which is don't repeat yourself. And that's going to be practiced even in a backend framework, just like Django. So let's back up a bit though and talk about the Django folder structure. You'll see as we're setting this up that we're going to be running a bunch of manage.py commands. And it might seem at first like there's some redundancy, like we're going to make a Pokedex project, and then we're going to make a Pokemon app, and then maybe even a Pokedex app. So what's the difference between an app and a project? Basically think about apps as being children to the grand project. And it's like a many to one relationship, right? We could have many apps within one project. Okay. Also, well, we'll talk about that later, actually. Um, More on the Django folder structure. If we were to think of an analogy, we could think of the ice cream section in a grocery being the project and the different flavors and brands being the different apps. So here's a basic flow of how we'll be calling our commands. We create a virtual environment, we activate that virtual environment, we run the installations that we need, including an upgrade of pip and of course Django. And then we start a project and then we start an app. That is the basic flow for starting up any new Django project. All right. With our lesson today, we are exploring Django object relational mapping. So we're going to be building our first Django project and app. We're going to create a model to emulate the data table, and then we're going to sync the Django models with our PostgreSQL database. Commands for that will include setting up scicop-g binary, just like you saw yesterday when we were running through this with Flask. We use scicop-g because it provides us with a lot of out of the box ways to interact with a SQL database. We will use commands like create DB to create a database, and we will also run a bunch of Python manage.py commands. So for those of you that aren't as familiar with Django, Python manage.py in your root directory is essentially going to be the bulk of your Django CLI commands. All right, creating a model. Hold on, let me silence this because it's getting annoying. Okay. Utilizing Django operational relationship mapping, we can create data tables with Python and ensure each field correlates to its intended purpose. It's easier to understand this when we see it live. Once we populate our database with ORM and our models, we'll then talk a bit about fields, which are essentially the different parts and components to an object. So luckily with Django ORM, a lot of the functionality for this is already in place, and it's a matter of plug and play for us as the developers. When we get to those fields, there may be some instances where it's preferable to use null, and some cases where it's preferable to use blank. This is a very difficult slide to read because it's so small. I think it's better to use the README for the comparison for this stuff. Oh, I forgot to say this yesterday when we ran through the exercise, so I'm going to say it today because I remember. Follow along. Hop into today's lesson or today's README, which will take you to today's lessons, and let's run through all of this together. Okay, yeah, we're going to talk about fixtures, and essentially one way to think about fixtures, right, is imagine you're setting up, I don't know, a Lego city, but instead of individually placing these Legos one by one, you can rely on a fixture to speed up the process of building out the different components of your Lego city, right? So you could think about fixtures as being prefabs or constructs, whatever you'd like to call them. And we'll see that in today's demonstration as well. All right, let's switch over to VS Code. I already started a project, but we're going to do this from scratch so some folks can follow along. I'm going to deactivate. It's the very first thing I'm going to do. And then I'm going to make a new directory. Let's call this Django demo 2. Not super creative, but it gets the job done. Now we can, let me make sure, I'm going to close some of these out so I don't get confused. Let's just clean all of this up. All right. Now I am going to set a virtual environment. So Python -m, it's venv, and I just want this, well, actually, I have not cd'd into my directory like I usually do. So I am going to type out, it is -2, the name of my project directory, and it will create a virtual environment in that directory. Now I can cd into that directory, and I see that it's got a bin folder. So I can now call source bin activate. And we see we are now inside of the Django demo 2 environment. So what is the very first thing I want to do?
Install Django.
Yes, exactly. I am going to install Django. So let's do that. All right, with Django installed, I can now, let's see, do I have to do any other kind of installs? maybe eventually, but I don't think I do right now at this very moment. So let's double check to see if everything is good to go. So I'm going to do a Python -m Django, and it's given me a bunch of commands. So that's how I know that this is good to go. With Django ready to go, I can now do Python -m Django, and this is where I can start a project. So the project that we're going to create here is Pokedex underscore project. And we have to pass in a relative path. I want it to be inside of this directory because I'm at the root directory of my project. So I'm just going to pass in a period to essentially pass as an argument my current directory. And now if I do an ls, I could see that I've got a Pokedex underscore project directory. Now I can do a pip freeze requirement. This is something that you're going to want to do at the start of every Django project as well. It's kind of like equivalent to your package.json in a JavaScript project. It is a means of version control. It contains the requirements necessary for your project to run. So that's what makes us portable. We could push this to a repository. Somebody else could fork it down and they could run it on their local machine because we have the requirements.txt file. And I am missing my S. So I'm going to add that, and then I'm going to hit enter. And let's do an ls.
I think you
Let's
need
see.
to point towards requirements.txt when you do it. I think
Sorry,
it's like, go ahead, sorry.
what was the question?
I think it's pip freeze and then like a less sign towards requirements.txt, I think.
Sorry, could you copy paste that into the Zoom chat? Interesting. So, okay, let's see. Yeah, I guess I got to fix the README then. But thank you for pointing that out. Now let's do an ls, and we have the requirements.txt. So I have to update the README so that we add that. Nika, what is this character called and what does it do in Bash?
Is it bad that I don't remember?
You know, I and we just covered it like 2 weeks ago too. It's I think it's like a redirect though. It's something like that. I'll look it up again later, but yeah, basically we use that symbol in Bash to point to the file that we want to run the pip freeze in. Yes, redirection. Thank you, Chad. All right. Let's see what's next. So now that we've actually created our requirements.txt file, we can do a Python manage.py and start a new app. So like I mentioned earlier, we do projects and we also do apps. We've already got our Pokedex underscore project, and now we could do our Pokemon app. One other difference between the two is because the project is the parent, whenever you need to go modify settings inside of your Django project, guess which directory it's going to be in? It is going to be inside of the project directory. So let's go to project Pokedex underscore project, and let's do an ls, and we see our settings.py. We are going to need this, so let's go ahead and open it. Okay. Now that we've created an app, one other, I guess, quirk or characteristic of Django is whenever you create a new app, you also have to manually insert it into your settings.py. I don't know why Django doesn't just magically do it for you, but that's how it is. So let's go ahead and add our Pokemon underscore app. Let's leave a trailing comma because some engineers get annoyed if you don't do that. And let's save. Okay, with that, the next step would be to create a database. So if you're following along, you probably don't already have a Pokedex database. I do because I had already just run through this. So let's do a PSQL. Let's do -C, and actually I'll just do I think I could do this \L. Or maybe not. Or I think it's -L, right? So I have a Pokedex database. If you don't have a Pokedex database, then you could do a create DB, Pokedex_DB. Or you could hop into your pSQL terminal and do a create database. Okay. Always remember your semicolon. Don't forget. Again, I've already got one, so I'm not going to run this. And I'm going to Control D to exit out. Now that we have our database set up, we have to add it to our settings.py. So I'm going to Command Shift T to open up the last tab that I have closed out, which was my settings.py. And I am going to go to where it says databases. And I'm going to make sure that I'm working in Postgres and not SQLite. So PostgreSQL, and then I change the name to Pokedex DB. And that is our database. I'm going to save. Now we can close this. And we will run a pip install. Well, let's first do a pip upgrade. And let's also correct our command because it's supposed to be a Python -m. And I am trying to upgrade pip. And now I am going to install scicop G binary. I don't fully understand why this installs scicop G3 versus what we did yesterday when we manually passed in scicop G2 binary. I wonder if I were to do scicop 3 binary, if it would install scicop G3. I mean, I guess I could try. It does not like that. So let's go back to how the README has it. And we'll see that it magically chooses to install scicop G3. Now that we have that ready, we can go and create our model. So inside of our Pokemon app, we got to go up one directory and into Pokemon app. We can now open up our models.py. So one cool thing about Django is it will create a lot of these files for you, even if they're just blank, but they're not entirely blank. It's one way to kind of guide you through seeing all the things that you're going to have to fill in as you go along. So we are building a model because we have just created the database. And instead of hopping into that database to manually create tables and whatnot, we're going to use our models to populate this database. One reason that this is your common practice when you're creating an application, let's imagine for whatever reason that we have to drop this entire database, right? We have to get rid of it. It would be a pain in the ass to have to go back there and like rerun everything, even if it's running a SQL script, right? Why go through that extra step when we could just use the magic of Django object relational mapping to do all of that for us? So with models, every time we have to make major changes to our application, release a new version, and deploy, we will have some automation in place to either run migrations or drop and recreate the database using ORM. So we have a models.py file. This is where we toss our models. And the first model we want is Pokemon. And we are going to call models, which we've imported from Django DB, which I believe, yeah, it's coming from Django. So let's do models.model. Now we want to create our first field, and we are going to use a character field. So we were talking a bit about fields earlier. They're basically the different columns that get created inside of your table. Forgetting my colon, so I'm going to add that. And with this field, you could specify certain things such as max length. And let's say we don't want a name to ever be longer than 255 characters, because if it is, it'll be difficult to read. Now we also want to add another property, and let's just add a level because Pokemon need levels in order to power up and evolve and all of that magical stuff. So we want our level to be an integer field because this has to be numeric, and we are going to set a default value to 1. Now that we have our model, we could save. I believe we could close. And the step you want to do after creating a model is making a migration. Let's see, how should I describe this? You could think about making a migration as, no, it's just the command that you run in order to, I guess, migrate the model into the database. So I don't know if that helps you remember it or not. It's what you do. So let's do a Python manage.py make migrations. And oh, snap, I am in the wrong directory. I got to go up 1 into my root directory, and now I can run my migrations. If you notice, manage.py is inside the root directory. And now that I've run it from the right level, if I do an ls and I go into my Pokemon app and I do another ls, I see that I now have a migrations folder. And if we were to hop in there, we'll see the migrations file. So it is not auto-completing. So I'll just have to type it out. Oh, and I don't want CD, I want code. I want to open this up. And voila, we have migrations.create model based off of what we added in our models file and an ID because databases need IDs, right? We didn't even have to type any of this out ourselves. So that is Django ORM magic happening right in front of your very eyes. So let's close that. Let's go up another directory and then one more directory. So we're back in our root. So we could call Python manage.py and run the actual migrate command. So first you make the migrations, which is what creates the migration files, and then you could review it if you want, but you could also just go ahead and call migrate to execute. It's telling me that no migrations to apply because my database already has the Pokemon table from the last time I ran through this. So you'll see something slightly differently. Let me know if you don't, if it's erroring out or anything like that, and we could troubleshoot it. But now you should be able to run another Python manage.py command. So now we're going to try to hop into our shell terminal, and we're going to use the shell to create another Pokemon, populate the table that we've created with a Pokemon. So let's say from Pokemon app.models, let's import the Pokemon class. Now that we imported it, we can add a Pokemon like Geodude equals Pokemon name equals Geodude. And his level is going to be, I don't know, 100. We are going to save Geodude. Oh, before I do this, actually, let's hop into our Pokedex DB. Let's do, well, do a select all from Pokemon app Pokemon, semicolon. We could see that this table only has one Pokemon right now. His name is Pikachu. And so let's save Geodude so we could see this update in front of our very eyes. This is essentially the equivalent of doing an insert into Pokemon, something like coughing, I think is a Pokemon. That like funny little ball that coughs smoke from the cartoon. He's gonna be, I don't know, level 50, and we're gonna say, oh, no. I don't do that yet. I have to specify what I want to target, which is basically the name and level, and then I pass in the values. And we have to use a string. I don't know if it's going to be particular about single or double, but let's do that. And then let's say level 50. If we now do select all from Pokemon again, whoops. We see, oh, we have Geodude, but I see what I did wrong. I forgot my semicolon. So easy mistake to make. It doesn't like this at all. Let's see. Oh, maybe because I have to call it Pokemon app Pokemon. Ah, whoops. Feel free to let me know what I'm doing wrong. So it didn't like this because I think this is the database name, right? Not the table name. The table should be, well, it's saying that the table is Pokemon app Pokemon. Let's do a D on Pokemon app Pokemon. Oops. Okay, it has column, ID, name and level. Why doesn't it like this? Is it really those?
It might be the double.
Okay, it is. All right, that's another update I'm going to have to make on the README. README has led me astray twice now. Okay, so if we do a select all from Pokemon, whatever, with a semicolon, we now have our third Pokemon. So yes, more than one ways to skin a cat. Hate that saying, but the magic again of ORM is you're able to do this repeatedly, right? So instead of going into our SQL database manually and fumbling through our insert statement, we can just have a model created inside of our Django application. And when we run things like make migrations and migrate, Django will tell us if we're doing anything wrong. Okay, We could also, in that very same console, run commands like Pokemon.object, objects, plural. Oh, why is it doing that? I don't think I want it to do that. Pokemon.objects.all. And it shows us we've got 3 Pokemon objects. So far, so good. That's about it for populating the database using models. Any questions on that part? Cool. Now that we have some Pokemon models, we can move on to, I guess we should talk about, we're going to talk about fixtures, but we also were going to talk about fields a bit more in depth because there are some instances where we want to use a null field, some instances where we want to use a blank field. Okay, where is my readme? Okay, cool. So the README today has some pretty good examples of some very useful model fields. So far, we've only used 2. We used a character field and an integer field. Here are some others. As you can tell by the name, decimal will allow us to use decimals instead of integers. And we have date and date time fields. We also have text fields, which unlike character field, there is no maximum character count. So if you try to pass that in, it's going to fail. And then we have Boolean field, which is for your simple true false values. So when you're defining a model field, you have the ability to either set the null equals true and the blank equals true options. And by default, they're both false. So knowing when to use these is a common source of confusion for developers, which is why we have this nifty little table here. So let's take a look at some of this more useful stuff. Apparently, you should never set null to true when you're working with file fields or image fields. Django stores the path from media root to the file to the image in a character field. So the same pattern applies to file fields. Let's go back up to character field. So if we set both unique equals true and blank equals true, in this situation, null equals true is required to avoid unique constraint violations when saving multiple objects with blank values. Huh. I think I have the feeling that even if I read that 3 or 4 more times, I'm still not going to have any idea what it's telling me. So I guess I'll just find out if I ever run into that issue myself. Let's see. Nothing's coming out at me right now as being extremely notable, but that chart is there for anyone to see whenever they want. And now to improve our Pokemon model, we are going to create a fixture. So let's go back to our Pokemon application. And let's now create a directory for fixtures. So are we, nope, we are not inside of our Pokemon app. So let's cd into that. And then let's make the fixtures directory. I could have also made that directory from here if I wanted to. Could have done something like this. And that will also create the directory. And then I could cd into that. And from here, let's do, oh, actually, no. I'm going to do a Python. My manage.py is a few directories up. I shouldn't have cd into this so soon. And I'm gonna do a dump data. I'm hoping this doesn't backfire on me in any way. Calling the manage.py from 2 directories deep. But I'm gonna try it because I've got nothing to lose. We are gonna call a Pokemon from the Pokemon app. We are going to indent by 2. And then we are going to generate this as a JSON file. So it's gonna go inside our fixtures directory as Pokemon underscore data. Oof. Unrecognized arguments. And I wonder if it's because I tried to be slick and call manage.py from 2 directories deep. So let's see if that was the issue. Oh no, it was not. So this is unrecognized, even though I'm passing it in. Oh, I wonder if it's that redirect again. I don't know though. I'm not sure. Nope, doesn't like that either. I think that path does need to be passed in as an argument. I have 2. I'm in my virtual environment. I'm in the root directory with manage.py, calling dump data. Huh. I'm passing in the application that I want to dump the data from. The application that has the model that I need. Indent is for how the JSON is going to be formatted. And this is the output. All right, let's see. What's our usage here? Manage.py dump data. That is app label, model name, which is what we have. Pokemon app dot Pokemon and everything else. And we have the intent here. Does it? I wonder if it just doesn't like the order that we're doing this in. So let me get rid of this indent 2. And I'm going to try to move that up here. It does not like that either. I'm just going to get rid of the indent entirely so I could whittle down what could be causing the failures one by one. No insult app with label. It's reading that second argument as the label instead of the first. So I think I might have deleted something else that I need to keep. Here's my dump data, Pokemon.add.
This one seemed to work.
Why didn't that work for me? All right, let's do it. Let's try that. We are going to use the redirect. And we are going to bring back our indents. And everything else stays the same. Yeah, that's what it told me last time. No such file directory. Do I have to?
Where are you? Are you where the manage.py is?
I am, yes.
Hmm.
I'm just going to straight up copy paste your command, Nika, and let's see if that makes a difference.
What?
I have no idea, but it just doesn't like me for some reason, apparently. Oh, I'm missing one character somewhere. What am I missing?
What's the
Pokemon.
T in fixtures?
Pictures, yeah.
Oh, wow.
Good.
Okay.
Me and my sloppy typing. Well, thank you again, Nika, for saving the day twice now. Or was that three?
Only I can remember that redirect.
Yes, that redirect, super important. All right, let's see. Now that we actually have our JSON file, let's take a look at it. So let's code Pokemon app, fixtures with a T this time, and Pokemon data. Cool. We have our Pokemon. So just like Django allows us to back up our data by dumping it into a JSON file, we can also load that data through the load data command. So if we were to, let's open that back up again with Command Shift T, because that was my last closed tab. Let's manually manipulate this. And let's add a fourth Pokemon. Charizard. And he will be 75. Let's save and let's see if we can load this into our database. So now we are going to run a Python manage.py, load data, and I think I have to point to it, even though the README isn't doing that. And let's see if that works. Cool. Installed 4 objects from the 1 fixtures. So I think we shouldn't see this in the database yet. Oh, we can. Wow. We would only have had to make the migration and migrate if we were changing the model. But because we weren't changing the model, we were just loading from the JSON. It updated the database immediately. So now let's try updating the model. Let's get rid of this and let's go back into our Pokemon app. Models, no. Yeah, it should be models, right? Models.py. Oh, well, I'm using CD. I mean, write code. And let's add some stuff. We've got name, we've got level. Let's now do date and counter equals models that let's just use a date field. We don't need to worry about time right now. And we'll pass in a default value of, wow, 2008. Oh, crazy. And now we could do a date captured as well. We'll do, this one we'll do a date time field just to experience both. And the default for this is going to be time zone dot now. We have to import it first. So from Django.utils, Django calls it time zone, even though if you were to do something similar like this in JavaScript, it would be timestamp. I think it's timestamp in Python as well, but since we're pulling this in from the Django utilities, it's going to be called time zone. And we don't need an N in there. And let's now do a description. This could be a text field, which again, unlike the character field, has no limit. So I think we could just do a default value of unknown. And maybe that's what I'll say if it hasn't been captured or something. And then we could set a captured value. This is going to be a Boolean to be false by default. I think that's everything we want to do. And now that we've updated this, if we hit our database, well, yeah, we queried the Pokemon app Pokemon database or table, I should say, and we see that it still only has 3 columns because we have to run our make migration and our migrate. So Python manage.py, make migrations. We see that we've added 4 new fields to the Pokemon model. Let's run migrate. Again, the make migrations just creates the migrations files inside of the application. So if we were to now go back into migrations, we could see that there is a 002 py file. Notice how it didn't just entirely overwrite the initial migration. We still have that initial state that we created. And so we can actually, I believe we could use this to, if we had to roll back from, like, let's say a bad update to a model, we could use these files to do that. So let's go back up to our root directory. So we could run Python manage.py and migrate. Cool. Now that it's been migrated, let's hop into our shell again. Python manage.py shell. And let's pull from that model again. Models, import Pokemon. And let's add a 5th Pokemon. Meowth equals Pokemon, name equals Meowth. Level equals 5. And now we have to fill in all of the other parameters that we, well, fields, I should say, actually, that we created. And I don't know, let's just pass in some random date. And let's say captured equals true. Here we can save. And if I print this object out, I guess that's what we could call it. Cool, we see it's the 5th object inside of our table. Okay. So the last part of this talks about some Python wizardry. Let's first look at our PSQL database. And we can see that we now have all these additional columns as well as our latest tree. Yeah, that is wonky. Let me do that again. And now this looks much better. Got 5 Pokemon objects, and we've got 7 fields. Cool. Okay, so adding class methods to our models. I guess we want to go back to, okay, let's go back to our model again. Inside of our Pokemon class, we can, I think we could do this up here. We're going to add a method This is called the dunder method. Don't ask me why, because I do not remember. And what this is going to do is it's going to return a string if you, I believe if you were to inspect the object. So you saw earlier when we tried to inspect the new Pokemon that we created, it simply gave us a representation of the object, which looked something like, where is that? Pokemon Object 5. So with this dunder method, we should see something that's a little more human friendly. And let's just say has been captured. If self.captured, else is yet to be cool. So that is our dunder method. We could also create additional methods like leveling up. And what this does is it will just increment the level by 1, and then it saves. And let's do one more. And that is to change the caught status. So we are going to say self.captured will equal whatever its opposite is. So this will allow us to toggle between either being captured or not being captured. And if you remember, captured is just a Boolean. So all this method will do is flip that back and forth. Okay. When we update fields, we do have to run migrations, but when we create new methods, we do not. So we could just hop back into our shell and we can, I think because I didn't exit out, I should be fine without reloading it. I could be wrong. Let's find out. If I were to do a print and see all my Pokemon, yep, it doesn't like that. Let me go ahead and re-import this. And I'm going to say Pokemon to objects, all. And now we could print Pokemon. We see the 5 Pokemon that we have. And we could run some methods on it. So let's say who is not caught yet. If I were to roll this back out, captured is false for Pikachu. So let's capture Pikachu. Let's go ahead and say Pokemon 0 in this list because this is a list. This should change the status for Pikachu. Change caught status. I spell it right. I'm gonna exit out. I'm gonna try that again. Oh, did I not save? Is that what that is? Save. Okay. Now that I've saved, I'm gonna create a fresh cell and I'm gonna try this again. So from Pokemon app models, import Pokemon. And Pokemon equals Pokemon.objects.all. And then we will print. Cool. Now we're actually seeing the updated, we're seeing the dunder method in action, right? Before it was just showing us the objects and their position inside of this query set. Now we're seeing this f string. Basically, it's going to read the caught status and it's going to tell us whether or not it has or has not been captured. So now if we were to do Pokemon 0 for Pikachu, dot change caught status. Let's read the Pokemon again. Let's see if we could just read Pikachu this time, though. Apparently, Geodude became the very first Pokemon. It's interesting. So it looks like when it updates one of these, objects, it pushes them back to the end of the list. That is interesting. If I were to query my database again, it did that here as well. The ID stays the same, but it looks like this may be sorted by, it's interesting. I don't think it's a date captured specifically. Yeah, otherwise, yeah, it would be at the top or something, but yeah, that's interesting. I'm not exactly sure why it pushed Pikachu to the bottom or how it's sorting right now. I think if I were to do, oh man. Can someone remind me how to sort ascending and descending in the query?
Was it order by?
Oh yes, that sounds right. What else am I missing?
I think you need the column name.
Okay, select all from Pokemon app underscore Pokemon order by, let's do ordered by ID. And now we have everyone ordered by the ID again. Thank you all. And thanks Cass for pointing out that dunder is double under. That makes a lot of sense. Interesting. Good stuff. Good stuff. Okay. So what else is left here? This is just adding another Pokemon, just calling another method. I mean, you guys got the picture. So the last part is, yeah, let's do this too. Let's go to the admin site. So let's hop out of the shell. We're done with that. We are going to go to our Pokemon app. And let's do let's do an ls. And let's open up our admin file. And here we can say from Django.contrib, import admin, but we also want to import our model. So we're going to import Pokemon from .models. And now we could register our models. So let's do an admin.site.register. Okay. So before entering our admin site with Django, we must create a super user to log into the admin site so that they can manipulate the data. So let's go back to our root directory. Let's do a Python manage.py, create super user. And we're just going to say user at gmail.com or whatever. And password will just be blank. Damn. Okay. Password will be password. Okay. Yes, bypass the password validation because this is just a demo. And now let's run our server. Cool. Command click on the URL to open up the link in a browser. Let's see. From here, if we type in admin, this will take us to our admin console. And if I type user and my very creative password, I am now inside my console where I can manually add and remove Pokemon. I could also see all of them too. And those are all the various ways you could manipulate your database. You could either run traditional SQL commands, you could do them through updating the models and make migrations. You saw that we could also manipulate them in our shell, and we also have this portal that we could use to manipulate them as well. So Django is very powerful. way more flexible, way more capabilities than the simple and lightweight Flask. But again, both tools have their various use cases. I'm going to stop there. I feel like I've been rambling. I typically like to keep my lectures shorter than 45 minutes, and that definitely was not shorter than 45 minutes. So let's call it here. Let's take a break, and I'll see you all back at 9.